Hello, everyone. My name is Paul, and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a great evening. I hope that you all are being safe, and that, of course, I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I hope that you find that safety and security in the future. There's a lot of stuff going on, as you can see here on the map. There's a lot of stuff going on in the news globally and inside of Ukraine. There's been several developments, some of which are kind of catching up with us, believe it or not, as several things get confirmed today that we reported on yesterday. And there's a lot of, particularly not good developments throughout the world, of course, because that's usually the kind of stuff that makes it to the news. And while we do go out of our way to search for good things or interesting stuff at the end of the night, we just, unfortunately, a lot of the stuff just isn't necessarily falls in that category of good or interesting. And so there is a way that we can help, though, and luckily you guys have made this a pretty awesome community. You guys have made it to where we can be the community that gives back. We can be the news that gives back, and that's really the goal of this whole project. We're never doing super chats on the channel. We're never pushing merchandise. If you check in the description below, you're going to see a ton of different donation links. We're constantly looking for more, so if you have some, please keep sending them to us. We're going through and vetting some right now as we speak regarding some of the stuff that we've already been sent, and we're constantly looking for more, especially for areas we currently don't have yet. We have two major requirements for these. All of them are verified, of course, vetted organizations. You can go through and you can look them up yourselves and check them out, but we were able to go through their tax history and financial records and all of that to make sure that they are indeed an official organization. And the second thing is that 80% or more of the donations that all of these organizations receive actually go to helping the people, meaning they go directly to their programs. They don't go to the salaries and the administration costs that are associated with these organizations, as some controversially do. So we're not here to pay salaries. We're here to actually help people, and with your guys' help and your guys' support, we can continue to do that. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, give us a like and subscribe, because the more people that are here, of course, the more that get to enjoy the news the way that we do it and get to enjoy, and get to join us here in our community. But of course, most importantly, the more people that are here, the more people that can chip in to these organizations that can help us do more good throughout the world, and that's really what we want to do with this. So none of us are here to try and make money off of this. We're all volunteering this. I have a full-time job. I'm not really worried about the money. It's all about wanting to help people. So thank you for the support that you've given us, but more importantly, thank you for the support you've given them. So with that, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive right here into the news. And it starts with our special report here in Kyiv. And we have an update regarding our little pupper that we're talking about yesterday. So we had a dog that was beaten and then thrown into a pit of trash with a landmine. That dog was rescued, as I said yesterday. It was reportedly rescued. The dog's name is Fox, and he had been beaten and mined and left to die in a trash pile by Russian forces. He's currently undergoing therapy with a vet in Makariv, and we have an update with him today. So we can take a look. So this is the way that they found the dog. If you take a look right underneath his front left paw here, you can see that's an anti-personnel mine. However, the dog survived. Sappers demined it underneath the dog, and they pulled him out, and this is him currently. It looks like he has some severe trauma to the back, into his hind legs, of course, but he is undergoing therapy and is receiving treatment. So I'm really happy to see that Fox is doing well. However, the news gets less sweet as we jump over here into Kyiv, and that's because we're getting another update regarding the amount of war crimes that have been committed. The war crimes continue to mount, and quoting the Prosecutor General's office today, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war in Ukraine, Russian troops have committed about 31,321 crimes against Ukraine and its citizens. At that point, and at this point, that amount of war crimes, should it be proven true under the different international investigations, including the one by the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, should these findings be true, as we've also seen with your report with the OSC, that would be subject to not just war crimes. Indeed, that would lead it to be believed that this has been systematic, and therefore that with it being systematic, it is now considered crimes against humanity, which brings into the ruling of genocide and ethnic cleansing. So that is really where this is going. That is why they're reporting this. That is why there's so many investigators there on the ground, especially in areas that have already been liberated, as of course the front lines are too active at this point to really be able to tell. But that's why we report on a lot of this stuff every single day. And we obviously have a very openly and plainly stated bias for Ukraine. We're going to say that pretty up front here, because we try to keep it apolitical and unbiased on this channel, but their amount of evidence means that we at least want to be able to plainly state that we have a bias, which is what we're doing here. But even here on the channel, like I've said before, you only see as a viewer about 10 to 25% of what we actually see throughout the day. And that's just because most of it includes an extreme amount of gore and violence and stuff that we really just don't want to show the public. It is very important for people to see, I think, as several images are, which is why we've been occasionally adding them into the 18 plus category for you guys to check out on the map. But for all intents and purposes, a lot of this stuff is just horrific, unnecessary violence that I don't think is something I really want to present in any manner. But it's an immense amount of war crimes, and we've built our bias based off of these, not necessarily just because everyone else is backing Ukraine at this point. We're not trying to jump on a bandwagon. We're trying to report the news here. As you jump over here into Kharkiv, the Kharkiv Oblast is still under a pretty significant bombardment, even from the Russians themselves in Belgorod, as we showed here on the channel. 6 to 8 rockets every single morning, and that's being TBM theater ballistic missiles fired from the Belgorod Oblast. This is coming from Ole Subedov, who is the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration, who has stated, quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the city of Kharkiv, Chuhiv, Izium, Bohodivkiv, and the Kharkiv districts of the Kharkiv Oblast on July the 3rd. 5 citizens were injured. Local residential buildings were damaged. And we can see some of that here. So these are photos coming from the latest strike, and you can see these are very deep craters. These aren't just these aren't the Katyushas that are doing this. This is very large ordnance that is causing this immense amount of destruction as we take a look here. And Kharkiv is under pretty sustained bombardment. Look at this. This crater is deeper than this man is tall. So very significant amounts of ordnance that are being fired. And there's no tactical or strategic importance of Kharkiv at this point in the war. Any chances Russian forces had of taking the city of Kharkiv and the Kharkiv Oblast have been long gone, as the Russian forces have been pushed so far from Kharkiv itself and Kharkiv proper that their standard artillery systems are no longer capable of hitting the city of Kharkiv and many of the cities within the region. In fact, once again, Russians are having to rely specifically on Iskander-M missile systems, which are being launched out of Belgorod, just outside of the city. We've seen where those, as well as air defense systems, have failed because they are running out of ordnance, which would be newer ordnance, stuff that has been properly stored, and stuff that has been updated. And we are seeing where those missile systems are actually failing within the city of Belgorod, and are even coming back and doing a 180 and hitting their own firing stations. So pretty extensive, though. But they are firing, according to at least a citizen of Belgorod who filmed one of the launches, 68 missiles every single morning. We jump over here to Severodonetsk, where fresh images really showed us what is yet another completely destroyed Ukrainian city, similar to what we saw with Popasna, what we've seen with Mariupol, what we've seen with countless unnamed and small villages along this entire front lines and throughout this entire duration of the war. The city is gone. The city has been destroyed. It was destroyed in the fighting. Russians rely heavily on a massive amount of artillery using saturation bombardments, mostly from their BM-21 Grad system, which fires 122mm Katyusha rockets, which are dumbfire rockets. They can fire up to 40 of them at a time. They also use heavily smirched systems, but the massive amount of artillery usage it's indiscriminate. It's not precision guided munitions. It's not even rocket assisted munitions, right? It's not like an Excalibur round, which is fired out of a 155mm NATO main gun. It's or artillery piece. It's volume of fire, not precision of the fire. It's the machine gun of the artillery world, is basically what their tactic is. They completely blanket an area with artillery, meaning it doesn't matter what is in that vicinity. I want from this road. So I want from, let's say, I want from this gas station, the Urkanofta, to what's this? Pivovarova Road. I want everything in this block leveled, and that is Russian artillery strike. That is what they do. They cover that entire grid line, this entire square here, this entire section of the city. They'll just blanket it with artillery. Take a look. We've showed here on the channel, and you can go back and take a look at this. But the fields around where the fighting is taking place in the Donbass look much more like Flanders in 1917 than they do like a proper 21st century battlefield. A lot of the things, the trenches, the heavy use of artillery on both sides, really bring a reminiscent back to World War I, more so than a 21st century modern war. But we can take a look at some of this destruction here.
Військова служба за контрактом. Захисники є. Не повезло.
And so, much like Mariupol, even the structures left standing at this point are completely untenable. They're going to have to be demolished and then completely rebuilt, much with the rest of the city. As we reported yesterday, Lysychansk has fallen. We reported on this yesterday. The military staff of Ukraine refuses to admit that all forces have left Lysychansk and that the city has been fully occupied. However, we do know that Lysychansk has fallen. It is indeed, for all intents and purposes, completely occupied at this point. In fact, Shoigu even stated that the entire part of the Luhansk region had been occupied by the Russian forces at this point and reported that to Putin. Those claims we don't think are substantial enough, and we don't have enough independent evidence to state that that is true, but we do have enough to state that Lysychansk is in the hands of the Russians. We reported on this yesterday once again. Today, Ukraine officially admitted that they had pulled out of Lysychansk, and that is coming from their actual, their general staff of Ukraine and the Ukrainian armed forces. I saw the reports earlier. We see this coming here. Changing positions in war is a common thing. In fact, further defense of Lysychansk would create more problems for us than it would be an advantage at the tactical and strategic level. This is not a step of goodwill, and absolutely certainly not completion of the assigned tasks. For now, it is necessary to save as many people as possible and not not a completely destroyed city. The primary task is to stabilize the front line, and after receiving all necessary weapons from Europe and USA, exhausting the slave army, go on the counteroffensive. Unlike slavery, Ukraine protects every defender. Unlike the Slavish invaders, our military is not in the habit of dying, and reporting mythical successes is to its people or leadership. Glory to Ukrainians as defenders who mercilessly destroyed hundreds of invaders. For every meter of the Ukrainian land, victory will be ours, and all captured cities will be liberated. They said that, we will be back. They stated that in their official briefing. We will be back. The Russian Minister of Defense Shoigu, who, by the way, has never served a day in the Russian military in his life, by the way, reported the seizure of the entire Luhansk region, claiming Russian troops had captured but not only Lysychansk but also nearby settlements, and the largest of which would be Belogorovka, Novodorsk, Malory, Azantsevo, and Belgorod. Ukraine has denied the statement of Sergei Shoigu that Lysychansk is completely occupied and that the Luhansk at the greater level has been completely occupied. So we do not know how far back Ukrainian troops have withdrawn at this point. There is still what you could consider a pocket and a danger of encirclement. So there are probably more significant gains by Russian forces. We just don't have enough independent information to verify. So Rooster Cyburn said, I wish NATO could get involved in a conventional way. So the thing is that any NATO involvement would, without a doubt, escalate into a nuclear strike of some sorts, limited, whether that was tactical nuclear weapons or not, on whether or not the MAD or mutual assured destruction doctrine is still in place. Mutual assured destruction would happen. That nuclear doctrine really hasn't changed much since the Cold War. It's still the same. Conventionally, the U.S. and NATO partners could probably completely overrun Russia in a conventional manner. The issue is, however, that doing that, in at least, keep in mind, the Russian people, they're not bad people, they're very smart. As like a population, as a group, as an ethnicity, the Russians are very smart, they're very independent, they're very great people. But they don't have any independent news outlets. They only have what the government is telling them. They only have government state-run media sources. They don't have anything other than that. They only have what the government's putting out. And the government is putting out that NATO is the enemy, that Ukraine is the enemy and full of neo-Nazis, that every NATO partner is run by neo-Nazis, and that the way of the world is shifting in the favor of Eastern ideology rather than Western countries. And inadvertently, what that ends up doing is if you were to engage Russia in any way, in any conventional manner, taking nuclear weapons off the table, which isn't sensible, but taking nuclear weapons off the table, that in and of itself would put Russia in the average Russian's mind. That means that the government was right. NATO really does want to destroy Russia. And there's nothing more unifying than a common enemy. So even though they may be divided, at least quietly or unquietly, regarding what's going on in Ukraine right now, attacking them conventionally with NATO would then immediately shift, because anyone that's on the fence or anyone that only has slight protests against Putin regime, now that he is right, is going to be 100%. That would be a boost in nationalistic fervor, and then therefore you would see a large increase in military capacity, industrial capacity, and also enlistments. Would Russia fire the first nuke? Probably. Russia has a very aggressive doctrine, and in fact, they're one of the few countries in the world that using nuclear weapons is not considered a last resort measure. In fact, under Russian doctrine, the use of nuclear weapons, at least tactical nuclear weapons, can be used as part of a screening for a large retreat of Russian forces to prevent them from becoming from completely being destroyed while they're being routed. So that is something that if Russian forces start taking, this war flips a complete 180 into Ukraine's favor and Russian forces completely start routing out of Ukraine, we could actually see the use of tactical nuclear weapons because it's within the Russian doctrine. Russia also maintains that nuclear weapons will be used in the event that its sovereignty is truly being their sovereignty in their nation is being attacked. National defense. They have stated that they will use nuclear weapons, conventional or non-conventional, regardless. It doesn't matter if it's in defense of the state, they are willing to use it. The only saving grace is that, unlike in the United States, where the president gives the order, everyone launches, in Russia, independent military commanders actually have control of the nuclear weapons. Putin can give the order, but each commander at his nuclear station has the ultimate choice of whether or not to also say launch or not to launch. And that is the same exact thing that saved the world from nuclear destruction during the Cold War. We jump back over here where we actually backtrack a little bit to Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, which received massive amounts of shelling today. Rocket attack here in the city of, within the city, quote, rocket attack on the city of Slavyansk in the Donetsk region on July 3rd. 6 people were killed, including 1 child. 15 citizens were injured. And that's coming from Vadim Lek, who is the mayor of Slavyansk. And we can see the destruction of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk here. Based on the size of these munitions, they look like they're probably Smerch munitions. They're not the standard 122 millimeter Katyusha rocket that's fired by a BM-21 Grad. But still, these things are the most accurate things in the world. They're a very old weapon system to begin with. They don't really use precision guide munitions. And you can see that, one, they're large munitions, but you can see how much of a spread there is on them. I mean, you have an impact here, two impacts here, an impact here, impact there, and a couple impacts, it looks like, over here. They landed close together. So very widespread. These things are indiscriminate. These are indiscriminate rocket attacks against a densely populated civilian area, and that in and of itself is a war crime under the under Protocol 1 of the 4th Geneva Convention in 1948. Military commanders, if they are planning on conducting operations in civilian targets, because civilian infrastructure and civilians being present do not inherently, under the Geneva Convention, mean that is no longer a military target whatsoever. In fact, the Geneva Convention really allows for a significant amount of collateral damage to be done under the Geneva Convention, because it understands the fact that war is very messy and that civilian casualties and destruction are just inherent to war in and of itself. What it does is it places limitations on those. For the fact that the commander of this artillery battery did not put forethought and planning into using some kind of a precision method of destroying or to mitigate the destruction of civilian infrastructure and the loss of civilian life because of such a widespread attack here. Therefore, under the Protocol 1, since he didn't put that into his planning and still gave the order to do so, that is now considered a war crime. There was no planning, there was no attempt to limit the destruction and loss of civilian life and collateral damage. And you'll see why that is multiple times throughout this war. And you can see some of it here. So this is some of the destruction that took place in both Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. And you see most of these are non-military targets. These are mostly homes. I mean, these are mostly, like civilian infrastructure. These are not military targets. Which ultimately means that because you can't even pinpoint a military target within any of this, means that would inherently now be a war crime. If there was a military target in one of these, we'd probably be able to, bring up the question, or Russia would be able to say, well, we destroyed military targets. They were within Kramatorsk to Slavyansk, and therefore we had to conduct a military strike against them. The strategic and tactical benefit outweighed the caution for civilian life, which is arguable in some cases, and you don't see that here. Take a look.
Ебать прилеты. Ебать пидорасы, блять, ебать там дымится нахуй. Фу, блядь.
And once again, the OSC did release the report regarding the atrocities ongoing in Ukraine, and they said with just a 3-week investigation in just the liberated parts of Ukraine, that while they could not independently confirm that it was that these are crimes against humanity, the pattern that it may be systematic does certainly say that it is likely considered crimes against humanity under the international law. So that that in and of itself, and that's just a 3-week investigation between the very beginning of the war and April the 5th. So a very significant thing, and you see this here, over and over and over again. Just like the prosecutor, the general prosecutor's office in Kyiv, you're just seeing, every single one of these points that we say here, shelling in this city, shelling in that city, missile hits, Mykolaiv, missile hits Odessa, shelling in Slavyansk, shelling in Lysychansk. Every time we do that, it's, add another, it's a tally mark, add another one, add another one, add another one. We move over here, and this is Dorobopia, which is a city here in the Donetsk region, where more Russian shelling occurred in this region. Russian occupiers shelled the city of Dobropilya in the Donetsk region on July the 2nd. 2 people were killed, 3 citizens were injured, including a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old child. 1 residential house was destroyed, and another 6 were damaged. That's coming from Pavlo Krylenko, who is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. As we jump here onto the other side of Donetsk, though, a very deep strike against Russian targets here by Ukraine, likely the work of HIMARS. A Russian ammunition depot near Snizhne was hit here deep in Donetsk Oblast, deep behind Russian lines. The facilities were completely destroyed, and they continue to cook off and burn even as we are speaking now. So let's take a look. So we can take a look here. So this is some of the destruction we're seeing, some of the cook-off here. Very bright, obviously. It looks like they had some flares in there that have ignited.
Все, полетели ракеты.
So it's just the ammunition depot cooking off. Likely, this is going to be a much more major ammunition depot than any of those seen towards the front lines. The front lines are going to be more unit dependent. They're going to be more catered to just supplying that individual BTG. But the ones back here are going to be much larger. Think of it kind of like a pyramid. It comes from stockpile in Russia, a stockpile in Russia, and that gets sent to the regimental level, division level, and which is probably where this is at. This is a much larger stockpile, and then it gets sent to, from here, trucks take it to much smaller stockpiles closer to the front for each battalion tactical group, such as maybe up in Popasnar, Kadivka, and then trucks from that battalion tactical group are going to come in, grab that ammunition, and bring it to the units as they need it. which would be a pull logistic system, or as we see Russia using, based off of their doctrine, they use a push logistic system, which means they get it, the troops on the front get it if they need it or not, which is great if you're operating in a chemical, biological, radioactive, or nuclear CBRN environment, which is what that doctrine, what the Russian doctrine basically is hinting at, is this is Russian forces operating in a radiological environment, because it's probably post-nuclear strike with a war between NATO and Russia, or NATO and the Soviet Union. But we see that as being a fault to the Russians, at least during this type of conventional war. But regardless, the logistical system's kind of the same. However you do it, it's just the amount of supplies you're moving, as opposed to where they're kind of being set up. So, but that is the situation here. A very deep strike, about the only weapon system capable of reaching this deep into Russian lines and also being that hard hitting is going to be the HIMARS system. There's not the only artillery system that is employed by the Ukrainians. As we can see here, this is an M109 Paladin battery that's hard at work. The M109 Paladin is a NATO artillery piece. It's a 155 millimeter main gun that's put inside of, which is essentially a giant tank. They're very thinly armored. So while they look like tanks, they are not tanks. They're very thinly armored. They only protect against small arms fire and shrapnel. They don't really protect against anything else. But on average, the 155 millimeter main guns on these things, with just conventional munitions, on average outrange Russian conventional warheads by about 5.5 kilometers. So they have very good standoff, and they're wreaking a lot of havoc on Russian troops. Let's take a look.
Увага, батарея! 2 снаряда швидким, 1 залпом, 333!
Very nice. Very, very nice. As we jump down here to Melitopol, Melitopol's airfield is still burning. Russia actually tried to say, why would Ukraine kill its own citizens? Well, Ukraine didn't hit the city of Melitopol. They hit the Melitopol airport, which is currently being used as a military base and command and control center, as well as an air base for Russian aircraft. Melitopol has been occupied for the duration of the war at this point. However, HIMARS are now allowing Ukrainian forces to strike much deeper into Russian territory and Russian-occupied territory, and we can see that playing out here. The airfield is still burning after the strike, which occurred yesterday.
Заснять вам поближе, что вообще происходит сейчас в Мелитополе. Горит аэродром, горит весь аэродром полностью. Короче, вот такие вот дела. Аэродром горит пламенем. Вон, вдалеке пламя. Не знаю, что там горит. Самолеты, вертолеты, может, склады какие-то. Но если бы склады, они взрывались бы, конечно. Полностью вдоль, вдоль весь аэродром, вот это весь вдоль, он весь горит. Начиная от военного городка, где казармы.
So, pretty significant amount of destruction there at Melitopol Airport. We still don't have any battle damage assessments to what has happened here, but we can safely say that there's probably a significant amount of damage to at least Russian air capacity. As you jump over here into the Kherson Oblast, another large fire is being spotted from Chernobivka. Chernobivka is part of the greater Kherson metropolitan area and is closest to the Kherson International Airport. Russian forces, after getting hit about 9 separate occasions at Kherson International Airport, essentially gave up the position, moving most of their air forces, mostly their helicopter fleet, southward towards Chaplinka at a field air command post there. However, Russian forces reportedly are only setting up positions only 3 kilometers from the airfield, and we've seen rather significant blazes happening as the fighting is able to be seen from Chernobivka itself, and additional rather large fires, I should say, lit the night sky over the city today. which is what we can see here. This is coming from an apartment complex here in Chernobivka. And as we jump up here, this is in Pervomisk, which is a small village up in the Mykolaiv Oblast, where shelling hit this village. According to Vitaly Kim, the head of the Mykolaiv Regional Military Administration, quote, in the morning, as a result of shelling in Pervomisk, Mykolaiv region, a residential building and garages caught fire. You can see some of the destruction here. But that is actually it for inside of Ukraine. But don't worry, there's plenty of different stuff coming from outside of Ukraine as well as we begin to roll into the international news. We immediately jump up here into Russia, where we have a couple of different points. The first thing is that the Russian Orthodox Church actually weighed in on the subject of Ukraine, and the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church on the war in Ukraine stated, quote, Russia has done nothing wrong to anyone. The world is turning against it out of feeling of hatred, envy, and indignation. The McDonald's of Russia, after McDonald's pulled out of Russia, they rebranded. Russia basically took it over and rebranded it as something else, but it's basically a knockoff McDonald's because their people were really, really upset they couldn't have their Big Mac anymore. However, it's not working out so well. As we can see here, yeah, I wouldn't want to eat moldy buns either. At all. That... Ugh. Makes you want to get sick. And there's also some fires on the Capitol Towers in downtown Moscow. The Capitol Towers are essentially Russia's version of the Twin Towers, which were in New York City and were brought down during the 9/11 attacks. Reportedly, at least according to state-run media agencies, scaffolding caught on fire on the rooftop. No further information has been reported. But we can see here the fire up here on the top of the Capitol Towers.
Настройки на башне? Это он сильный такой получается?
As we move over into the rest of Europe, we have a couple of different points that we can hit on here. First thing is down here in the south, where Bulgaria expelled 70 Russian diplomats. More and more countries at this point are seeing that, you know what, maybe there's no point in keeping diplomatic ties with Russia, and as the war in Ukraine continues on and the current situation diplomatically and politically with Russia regarding any kind of hopes for negotiations or, you know, trying to keep talks open with them and good dialogue with them seem to have run out as they've kind of run its course. So at this point, 70 different diplomats have been expelled from Bulgaria. Russia is rather upset about this, but we're not hearing a whole lot as to what the repercussions will be on the Russian side. Likely, they will also expel Bulgarian diplomats in return. That's usually the course of action.
Опа, смотри.
Jumping up further north, Slovenia is going to send its MiG-29s to Ukraine after the Czech Republic stated that they will patrol Slovakia's airspace until they are able to purchase new jets. So that means that Ukraine and the Ukrainian Air Force will be getting more fighter aircraft. It's already a weapon system that they're capable of using. They use the MiG-29 Fulcrum quite a bit. Over here in Italy, the Marmolada glacier has collapsed in northeastern Italy. Part of a large chunk of the Alpine glacier broke loose and slid down the mountainside, sending ice, snow, and rocks slamming into hikers on a popular trail on the peak. 6 people were killed. More than 10 are currently missing. 5 helicopters and several teams of dog handlers are searching for the victims. It's reported that 8 have been found already, and the victims are hospitalized. Condition of one of them, according to doctors, is considered critical. It's not the only tragedy. Unfortunately, today here in Copenhagen, a man opened fire at a busy mall in downtown Copenhagen. The shooter is a 22-year-old Danish man, which was just confirmed by the police. He is the only suspect in this. Several people were wounded and killed during this. The eyewitnesses stated that the shooter carried a hunting rifle. So some of the first footage coming in confirms this at this point. We have quite a bit of footage coming out from this today. BBC is also reporting on this, obviously using a lot of the same footage going on here. The shooter was identified. He apparently had a YouTube channel. His name is apparently Noah. His YouTube channel obviously had some rather distressing images on it. He reportedly stated, "Please shoot me," when he was arrested by Danish police. We jump down here south into Turkey, where Turkey has seized a ship full of stolen Ukrainian grain. A Russian ship pulled into port carrying 7,000 tons of stolen Ukrainian grain from the city of Berdyansk, which has been seized by the by Turkish Port Authority under the request of Ukraine. The occupational government of the Zaporizhia Oblast has stated that this is Turkish piracy at this point. However, under international sanctions, that ship is now detained and is now currently sitting moored off the coast of a Turkish port. That's not the only thing. Protests here in Georgia. There's anti-government protests ongoing in the country of Georgia. Thousands of citizens have gathered. They're rather unhappy with their current government, especially when it comes to their shortcomings in its reform policies and trying to join the European Union, which they were currently denied, but they are still prospective. And they're currently demanding the resignation of their pro-Russian government. As we jump down here into the Middle East, we start up here in Syria. This is Tal Rafiyat, which is in northwestern part of Syria. 2 SAR servicemen were killed in a UAV airstrike that was carried out. They were injured in a UAV airstrike. It was a Turkish UAV strike. The purpose of the drone was the building of the military in the village of Tal Rafiyat. After the incident, military police of the Russian Federation Armed Forces arrived at the impact site. You can see it seems to have been a kamikaze drone of some sort. It's not the only thing. Pro-Turkish group has transferred equipment into northern Syria. The pro-Turkish organization Jayash Watania Soria transferred manpower and equipment to the settlement of Tal Rafiyat today in the province of Aleppo. It's alleged that the reinforcements arrived in preparation for what is considered to be the possible new military operation by the Turkish armed forces against Kurdish troops that are located within this region. And that military operation is alleging to the Turkish proposed military operation that was supposed to have started several weeks ago, at least according to the Turkish government, to expand that 30-kilometer buffer zone between Turkey and the Kurdish occupied regions to 60 kilometers. And we can see some of that today. Lots of Toyota Hilux. A lot of Toyota Hilux with Dishkas and ZSUs in the back of them. By the way, that's a ZSU 23 TAC 4 or a 23 TAC 2. That's an anti-aircraft gun mounted to the back of this thing. And that's a bongo truck. that's a bongo truck. That's a Hyundai bongo truck with a it's literally a BM-21 launcher mounted to the back of that. The ingenuity of these people knows absolutely no bounds. But quite large formations of pro-Turkish militias within Tal Rafiyat. Let's jump over here. This is in Suleymania, within Iraq, northern Iraq here, where several people were injured in an explosion of unknown nature in a cafe within the city. We currently don't know what the cause of the explosion is. However, there are several contenders for what organization could have been behind this, including the leader right now would probably be the Islamic State. As we jump down further into the south of the country, we can see here in the agricultural regions in southern Iraq that 5 agricultural fires have been recorded within the Misan governorate of southern Iraq. Also, a number of fires in orchards and poultry farms were also noted in the Babil government. This further exacerbates problems already created by a widespread drought and the drying up of the Euphrates River, where roughly 30% of all agricultural land inside of Iraq has already been destroyed because of the drought, and the country is starting to run dry. It's been battered by sandstorms. Multiple fires have been set by the Islamic State and others of unknown origin. Most places have lost at least a third of their crop harvest in regards to fruit crops within the region. Once again, 30% of the region has lost its arable land. Up here in Uzbekistan, violent protests continue to the third day, according to the president of Uzbekistan. Unfortunately, quote, unfortunately, there are fatalities among civilians and law enforcement officers. Thousands of wounded have been hospitalized and are being treated. The opposition claims that 5 have been confirmed dead and would very well be within the dozens. His official statement has been linked to this. You guys want to take a look at it? So this is officially coming from the president of Uzbekistan. However, videos today surfaced where a crowd of men were attacking a Uzbekistani BTR, armored personnel carrier, and seizing it from the military. They proceeded to beat the soldiers inside.
ұрып асты қара адамдарды ұрып асыпты анда ішінде солдатлар не іші қашып асыпты тығылып иә таза аптауын солдат танкіні басып алды адамдар танкіні басып алды прям өрте жіберсе болады бұл жерде.
Large groups of Uzbekistani military were seen gathering throughout the country and are currently en route to Nukus, which is the center of the protests within the country. Missed one thing, and it would appear over here in Russia, actually, which I'm sorry about, guys. So this is a famous very famous scientist who worked on quantum physics. He died while he was in FSB custody. Is Dmitry Kolker, who worked heavily within the field of quantum physics. He was arrested and taken from his hospital where he was currently suffering from cancer, and he was arrested under the suspicion of state treason. He died just 2 days later, as of today, from cancer as a result, and while he was in FSB custody. The New York Post and both Reuters are documenting this if you guys want to go check them out. As you jump down here further into the country, Sri Lanka, the emergency services have began to stop operations completely. The fuel situation inside of Sri Lanka, as the country is within economic collapse, has officially run out. Essentially, there's not enough gas in the country to operate ambulances and fire trucks at this point. So no longer will these be operational, and therefore people will have to find their own way to the hospital or fight their own fires. And if we jump over here and into Libya, we can actually see where the Libyan army has joined in the protests against the government within Libya. The protests started on July the 1st, and they just demanded that residents have demanded that the government dissolve and that new elections be held, as the country is currently in a state of emergency and currently trying to solve an electricity crisis. The general command stressed that it won't let the people down or leave them vulnerable to blackmail and interference. However, they called on citizens to hold the demonstrations in a peaceful manner. Libya has been in some turmoil since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi, and the situation has not improved a whole lot since the Arab Spring within the nation. We jump over here to Chile, where we can see a man was paid 300 times over on accident by his company, and he disappeared with the cash. The man the man discovered he had been paid nearly 150,000 pounds for a month's work instead of the usual 450 pounds. The unnamed staff member at an industrial plant did initially raise an eye-watering overpayment for May with his manager, who then flagged it to HR. He agreed to return the cash and promised to go back to the bank the following day, but instead of giving it back, the man withdrew it and hasn't been seen since. So, where'd he go? I mean, I don't blame him. I would probably drop off the entire grid too if I was overpaid by that much, but I'd just go find different employment. I would change my name, my identity, I'd do everything. Man, it would yeah. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys would do if you got paid 300 times over from at your workplace. You jump up here into Ohio, up in Akron, which is in the greater Cleveland area. And we see another instance of pretty significant police brutality occurring. A 25-year-old African-American man was killed. His name was Jalen Walker. Was killed during a traffic stop, in which case he only had one ticket and no other criminal record. He fled from the vehicle, or he fled initially with the vehicle at the routine traffic stop, and then while the vehicle was still in motion, he got out and ran on foot. Several police officers opened fire on him, and he was shot. The police officers fired over 90 rounds in quick succession, 60 of which ended up striking him. He was killed instantly, essentially. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and as right now, they have released that body camera footage. It's very difficult to see what's going on, but we will take a look here. So that is Jalen Walker, and I think it's probably pretty important to see this, so we're going to show it. Once again, they fired over 90 rounds together, 60 of which ended up striking Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, they said that he had been armed and that he had fired at one of their vehicles, and that the way he turned, he perceived to have been armed and dangerous, and therefore they opened fire on him. Mr. Walker, when he was after he had been shot and killed, they discovered no firearm on him. They did not discover a firearm on him. There was a firearm inside of the vehicle, but it did not have a magazine inserted into the weapon whatsoever and was currently unloaded. The ongoing investigation, we'll see how that goes. There are currently protests all over the country as a result. We jump back here over into Tel Aviv, where we can see here that specialized robots have been made to harvest fruit on a much more uplifting note. So Tavel Aerobotics Technologies has developed a special flying autonomous robot that is used to harvest various fruits, including apples, peaches, nectarines, pears, plums, and citrus fruits and avocados. According to the management of the company, the startup will become the best in the segment of production of specialized fruit harvesting robots in the world. Sorry, I had some copyright music there. But as we can see, harvesting fruit is extremely labor intensive, as a lot of fruit doesn't ripen all at the same time. Per se, they each fruit ripens at a different rate, and so they these things autonomously harvesting is a pretty significant thing. It's once again, these are very labor intensive, and they are harvesting fruit like this is very labor intensive, requires a lot of people, and so this will hopefully cut back on those costs. But pretty cool concept. We'll see how well it works out. And something else that's really cool is over here, once again, at the Mojave Air and Spaceport. Satellites were launched using a specialized airplane. This is a Boeing 747 flying out of Southern California, straight towards space on Friday night. The modified jumbo jet took off from the Mojave Air and Spaceport in the Mojave Desert and released the rocket over the Pacific Ocean northwest of Los Angeles. The launch was procured by the U.S. Space Force for the Defense Department test program. The 7 satellites will conduct various experiments later this year, and the company will launch 2 satellites on a mission flying out of Newquay Airport in Cornwall, England. The satellites will conduct radio signal monitoring tests in a joint project between the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense and the U.S. National Reconnaissance Office. So you can go over to phys.org if you guys want to read up more on that. But that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, to say the least. Doing that kind of thing, I mean, any way you can cut back on the cost of launching, launching stuff into space, only makes it easier for us to do more space stuff. The more that we do space stuff, the cheaper it gets, because we develop better technologies and everything else to actually go into space. So that's really cool that we can now use a modified 747 that launches itself towards space and then therefore launch a rocket from a higher point in the atmosphere to actually kind of decrease on fuel consumption from a rocket payload. So that's pretty cool. Hopefully that can also increase payload sizes, which is really what holds us back, besides the fact that Earth sits in a gravity well. But if you want to learn more about that, you guys can, of course, go over to phys.org and learn all about it there. But with that, that's actually the end of the news tonight. A lot of unsettling things, a lot of things that are very hard to take in, some things that are aggravating to us and emotionally and personally. But that is the situation within the world over the last 24 hours. Hopefully things can get better, and luckily we can help with a lot of this stuff, and that's because we can be the news that gives back, but only thanks to you as the community. Please be sure to check out the video description below and check out all of the different organizations that are in there. We aren't going to be doing super chats on this channel. We're not going to be doing any kind of pushing the merchandising or anything like that. We're not here for that. I have a full-time job. Everyone here is volunteering. So we just want to help people. If you have more different organizations to add to that list, please let a staff member know. Our official website, and even better, our Discord is in the description below. If you want to jump on our Discord, you can check us out there. But of course, you can let a staff member know, give us a link, tell us a little bit about the organization so we can get the vetting process started, as we currently have with some others right now. And hopefully we can get it added to the stream and help even more people. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, give us a like and subscribe, and let your friends know about us. The more people that are here, the more people can enjoy the way that we do the news. But even more importantly, the more people that are here, the more overall good we can do in this world. We can make a much larger impact on people's lives. So, and I implore you, when you're taking a look at these organizations, don't just look at Ukraine, but also look at the others, which currently aren't in the spotlight for a lot of reasons right now. A lot of these are currently, going through extreme pains with climate change and a lot of other issues, food, water insecurities as is. Such as the Tigray region of Ethiopia, where 90% of people, in order to survive in the Tigray region, require humanitarian assistance. But due to the war in Ukraine, they've had the rations cut, humanitarian supplies cut, usually from anywhere from a quarter to a half, and that was emergently diverted over to the growing situation in Ukraine. So please go check out those other organizations too. And yeah, let us know in the description what you guys would do if you got paid 300 times over. But other than that, I'll talk to you guys later. I hope you have a wonderful night. We will not be streaming tomorrow. Tomorrow is Monday. It's also July 4th weekend, or it's also July the 4th actually of July 4th weekend. So we will not be streaming tomorrow. We'll be celebrating the holiday, or relaxing during the holiday at the very least. If you are American, please be safe with fireworks. 15,500 people injured themselves with fireworks last year, and had to go to the hospital. So please be safe with explosives in general. Celebrate safely. Enjoy spending time with family. And for the rest of you, I hope that you, your friends, and your family remain safe. And if not, I hope you find that safety and security in the near future. I really don't want any of the viewers going through any of the stuff I have to report on every single day. So But we will not be streaming tomorrow. We will be back here on Tuesday, 10 p.m. Central Time, or Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. And I hope to see you guys all then. So be safe. See you guys Tuesday night. Have a great one. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a wonderful rest of your night and a wonderful start to your new week. Bye now.
Слава Україні!